In the ice age of the dawn of your mind, you're running through space. You can't catch it, or can't run from it. What is chasing you? You've got to go faster. It's a star made of fire, a starless fire. It farts upon you. It farts your life out. It is your soul, the fart of life.
What is hurting my trauma victims? Today we got a show for you all about trauma. As far as my intro is concerned, I like to plug the podcast Behind the Bastards. I basically stole my intro phrase, I guess, from them. Go listen to Behind the Bastards. They're our unknown sponsor today. As always, also Jesus, hell, and children who are suffering are sponsoring us today. Let's get into it. Trauma.
Hey, Chris.
Hello?
Hey, I can hear you now.
Okay, can you see me too?
I can see you too.
Okay, cool. I thought fucking the thing you did with Fergus last week with the dinner thing was like hilarious, dude. I watched like the whole thing. Yeah. I like the close-up of like his mouth eating the lamb and shit and like talking. Like that was so funny to me.
Or like sauce on a biscuit.
I love that too, man. That was so... yeah,
Also, I think 140 is a good medium temperature. That's what I would used to do.
You would do
140?
140? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it could have been a little more rare, but it was pretty good.
Yeah. That was fucking cool.
This week, welcome. We are talking about trauma, and I'm not going to talk that much this week. What we're going to do is allow for Chris and Vanessa here, my guests. I shaved this week, and it didn't take. Now it's starting to take. Go figure. But we're going to talk about trauma, a deeply disturbing event. I think that was just like the basic definition on Google. But I'll let you guys talk about your understandings of experience. Vanessa works with traumatized individuals. All of us are traumatized on some level.
Yep, that's right.
Vanessa's like job is to work with children and adults, in various aspects. So I was gonna let her talk, and then I was gonna let Chris talk, and already I'm talking the whole time. One thing that is interesting I learned was about ACEs. Can you talk about ACEs? What that is, Vanessa?
We should get closer.
Yeah, let's get closer. Let's just get... Can we sit like this?
Yeah, that's fine. Do you want me to get closer too?
Let's all get closer, yeah.
So
yes, we're ACEs.
ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, and there's different categories of ACEs. Things like neglect, different types of abuse, maybe like not having a parent present, maybe like caregivers with struggling with substance use, caregivers with a mental illness. So these are different types of adverse childhood experiences that will like affect them.
And wasn't there like a count where it was like if you had 5?
Yeah.
If you have at least 5, there's something bad about, like, and it's not bad, but you're more just inclined towards like difficult life situations, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting to me because then I'm thinking about Juneteenth. That was a holiday. You know about that, Chris?
Yeah. I looked it up after you told me about it because I didn't know about it.
Yeah, and it kind of became like a debate, like recently politically a little bit too, where candidates were talking about to some level we're talking about reparations. How. And as far as I understand, it didn't mean like they know how to do it, but they were trying to propose some kind of legislation or discussion about reparations for the slave community and how the people that came from that community are still affected in some level today, I suppose. And it made me think, because if we're talking trauma, and we know that trauma is inherited, right? Like on some level, like I read once that that when you're in your mom's egg, that or no, when your mom's egg is in your grandma, if your grandma has a traumatic experience, on that some of that is passed along through the DNA. To where you have a little bit of the effects on some level of that trauma, right?
Yeah, so that's called intergenerational trauma.
Intergenerational trauma.
Because like when we are experiencing trauma, our brain is developed differently. You know, we have more of like the chemicals when you're under stress.
Cortisol.
You know what I mean? So that part of your brain is always overactivated, and it doesn't allow the other brains to form as much because it's spending so much time with the cortisol trying to cope with the trauma that's happening. So when you're really young and you're experiencing all this trauma, the higher functioning parts of your brain aren't able to develop because they're too busy like trying to cope with like the constant trauma in your life. So that means that you're not going to be able to develop those parts of your brain, and those are going to be passed on genetically to your offspring. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think that that I understand the discussion of reparations. I certainly understand making a holiday out of the day that slavery was ended. You know.
Yeah, because it was the final ending of slavery, right?
I think so. I think that's what it commemorates. Yeah.
So, but going back to trauma, before going there, like getting like, what is your definition of trauma? What do you think about when you think about trauma, Chris?
Well, I was thinking about it earlier today before doing this, and I was thinking how when I first started thinking about trauma, I related to other people, maybe being in situations with other people in my life, you know, and it being a traumatic experience. And then my first instinct is to kind of blame other people for whatever the situation was. But then I was thinking about trauma and thinking how, like, what if your own like internal thinking process is kind of messed up, so you're making things worse on yourself at the same time, you know, just by how you deal with things, whatever situation it might be. So trauma to me is like this whole kind of like range of things. It's a personal thing, right? How you experience events. It's how maybe you're treated by your community too, right? Because other people can traumatize you, I think. So that's where my mind went with it.
Okay, so you're thinking more of the effects of trauma.
Yeah. The effects of trauma, like in my own life, with a little bit of trauma, like I feel like I've had, but also, you know, it's how you're equipped to deal with it mentally when it happens.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So before we talk about the effects, trauma, like a broad general definition of it is like any event or experience that has become too overwhelming for someone to cope with. Does that make sense? So it could there's many different things. It could be like natural disasters, it could be abuse, it could be neglect, it could be, you know what I mean? It could be, you know, being in the military, whatever it may be, you know what I mean? So it's something where you have a circumstance in your life that it became too overwhelming, you became too overwhelmed, too stressed, where you weren't able to cope with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And that's where I started to think about like how prepared you are to cope with it, right? Which is why when you were saying about the parental structure and everything in a kid's life, if that's set up correctly, they might have a better chance of dealing with the trauma they come across in their life, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's like the direct trauma like that you experience, and then there's like vicarious and secondary trauma that you can experience trauma, like you can get triggered, like your own trauma can get triggered if and when like you hear traumatic experience from like a loved one. Like if you hear that, like if I heard that like something happened to Andrew or something, you know what I mean? Like that can bring up stuff for me, you know? So it can be like this secondary vicarious type of trauma as well. And it's kind of like what's happening right now. A lot of people are getting like their trauma's getting triggered because of a lot of the shit that's going on right now. Like whether it be like the shootings, you know what I mean? Like the by like law enforcement, like police, you know, or like the stuff in the border, like that stuff has been really triggering for me, you know what I mean? So that's kind of like that example of like the secondary trauma.
Yeah, where you're getting triggered by external things going on, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's not happening to you directly, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Got it.
Yeah, so when I was talking about the way that our brain develops differently, when we experience, like when you're really young, and or even like when you're in the womb, like Andrew was saying, when you're in the womb, or like when like they call it the critical years, like 1 to 3 year old, like 1 to 5, and you're experiencing a lot of trauma, your brain is still developing, and so you don't develop it the best that you can. You know what I mean? Because it's just trying to cope and cope and cope with the stress. And that leads to things like poor like attention, like hyperarousal, like no impulse control, like you can't, no abstract thinking. You know what I mean? So a lot of this stuff you see in like inner city kids, like urban. You know what I mean? Where there's like a lot of gang violence, a lot of violence in the community and in the home. So that's why, like, when me and Andrew will like we'll be here in like the Watts or Compton, Inglewood like schools. Like the kids are so like quick to act. You know what I mean? We're always breaking up fights because it's not like that. They're not inherently like bad kids. They're just, that's all they're used to, and also like their impulse control, their attention span, like their hyper arousal is like super it's impacted, right? And they're always on this like fight or flight. What trauma does to us, it puts us in like this permanent state of fight or flight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So you're just reacting, like, you know what I mean, because you're this hyper arousal. So because you're not really like you don't. It's like they have to learn how to kind of like stop and like think and like regulate their emotions. You know what I mean? Because they're just reacting on that fight or flight mode. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does.
How do you deal if you're in the, what are ways to deal with it? You have to learn about, do you have to have an awareness of that before, like, right? Or if you're a certain amount of...
Well, it depends. I mean, like, it's different for everyone. I mean, if you're a little kid, you need a lot of, I think if you're anyone, but if you're someone who's so young, like you're dependent on like your support system. If you have a support system, you know what I mean? You're dependent on your caregivers. Yeah. Of your educators to be like, something's up, they need help, they need resources, they need therapy, they need behavioral therapy, they need support, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because it's something that you can't do on your own, especially if you're young,
How have you guys dealt with trauma now that you're adults? Yeah. Do you have tools that you use?
Lots of drugs.
For me...
Just kidding.
I mean, like, honestly, like, trauma, like, my, like, deep-ass childhood trauma, I'm, like, barely at age 31, like, addressing it and looking at it. I've known a lot about it my whole life. You can't really, like, escape it. But I know it in this intellectual way. I can intellectualize it, but I haven't, like, processed it emotionally. And that's what I'm doing right now through therapy.
Therapy, yeah, for sure.
So that's, like, my way of what I'm doing right now. I'm doing therapy.
Okay, so you're kind of like scratching the surface of your trauma from when you were younger.
Yeah, so I'm like finally like diving into it in a way that I'm gonna be able to like to sit with the feelings and process it emotionally, so that's kind of what I'm doing now. Coping tools in general, like just coping with life, coping with like I guess the effects of trauma, because trauma also it can like give you an inclination to be like have like high anxiety levels or depression, you know what I mean? So like my day-to-day coping, one of my main things is doing yoga. That helps me. Like that's my form of like meditation, because my mind is really like hyperactive. I'm always thinking, so that's kind of my way to kind of like quiet my mind and like kind of have like a time and space just for me to feel like to kind of like I don't know, like feel centered, you know what I mean? And just kind of have like a time of just like quiet,
Relax.
Yeah, it brings you back to focus. I think that's what's so hard with kids too, growing up in broken households, right? Because they don't have like a safe place to focus, And then at school, there's going to be all these other kind of social conflicts that they have to deal with.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, the stressors are like, it's a lot of stressors going on at school, and if most likely their parents are going to have these resources and tools and knowledge of how to cope with their trauma, you know what I mean? So they're just kind of learning, how did mom cope, how did dad cope, maybe they fought and they were aggressive all the time. Maybe they drank a lot. You know what I mean? So like they're just learning like these different ways to cope.
That's what trips me out a little bit about like yoga and meditation, because you'll see at the schools that we work at, they actually some of them practice meditation, and and like I've looked into it a little bit. There's a lot of evidence that like the schools that they've that put these into, that it has decreased violence and fighting and whatnot, aggression, whatever it is. But the thing that makes me laugh about like yoga and meditation and wellness and all that stuff is that it's become kind of like commodified in such a way that it's like we're talking about these communities that really need like this wellness because their trauma or their experience is such that they're things are crazy for them. Their minds are always going a million miles an hour, and it's like they need that decompress, and it's the furthest from them, But it's like the closest to like the people that have like 10 sets of yoga pants and like 10 mats, and it's like an accessory thing. And it's like yoga is like this cool thing to do as part of your life. And for some people, I guess like us, it's a way to cope. I don't know. I had to vent about that.
I don't know. There's really
But do you think like the more commodified and like mainstream it gets, the more it'll like start to trickle down though to those other social classes?
Yeah, I think there's a Trojan horse, effect to that. But the only thing that is a bummer about that, and this is the meditation of the thing too. It's like we're all we'll find whatever we are meant to find when we're ready to find it, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But it's like the commercialization of it in that way makes it feel like gross to me when I look at it from the perspective of like people thinking about yoga and that's all they know is it's like that. I feel like the commercialization could put off some people that might dig it if they knew that it was like not.
Well, I have I have friends right now who are like, I want to do yoga, but I don't want to go to a studio because I don't feel
comfortable.
Yeah, like they see it as like this white thing, you know what I mean? Which is
for sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's funny from considering where it came from.
I mean, that's how I looked at it too when I was first like hearing about it. Like this crunchy ass like white person thing.
Yeah,
like,
white dreadlocks.
Or like this bougie, like white dreadlock guy, or like bougie white moms, rich mom. You know what I mean? Where and it's almost like this luxury thing.
Like a luxury type, yeah. It
So
goes with like the
I
BMW.
do. I have friends who are just like. They don't feel comfortable because they don't know, and they're always asking me like, oh, I want to go to your class, or like, is there any classes where there's more like a different, like a diversity, you know what I mean, where they can feel a little bit, because it's something new, it's something new to someone, so not feeling like there's people that look like you there is gonna kind of make them feel like, I don't know, like awkward or something,
Yeah, for sure. No, I can totally like identify with that. I don't know if I would go to like a yoga studio either,
Well,
yeah.
So here's we got about 17 viewers and counting on the network.
Wow.
And so you can plug now. If anyone ever wants to plug, you plug. I'm plugging for the viewers, the audience. We have a lovely yogi here who she does the private lessons, so you don't have to feel the weird effects of encroaching capitalistic vermin zombie yogis, which is cool. So, and Chris is in a really cool band.
With you.
Plug it.
He just wrote a really cool song. We're gonna use some song. We're gonna use some fuck fun shit eventually, for like transition shit. My dream for this is out of the we're breaking the context of the talk show.
This is all traumatizing for me anyway. So
yeah, I'm gonna be traumatizing you and everyone anyway. But it's like my dream for YouTube is like, I already have a network, so I'll just have talk shows and different TV shows and concerts or whatever. It'll be a whole like television network. And I just have to get better at my viewers or my ratings. My ratings are shit right now, but I'm the boss of the network, so, I'm on my ass. It sucks, man. I'm getting traumatized by this motherfucker, this boss. But, anywho.
Yeah, man. No, it's going to go good. I think this is fun.
And I was going to say, that's kind of one of my methods of coping. We were talking, because Vanessa was saying, and I hadn't really thought about that, where it's like, we talk. When I think about it a lot, I'm thinking about the effects of the trauma that I may have experienced. But I remember reading this book called, like, It Didn't Start With You. And the whole therapeutic approach was to learn about your trauma, even your family trauma, and that would have some sort of unlocking capability. And it's like, I don't know shit about that. Like, I have coping skills. Like, I do art and I do all this stuff to sort of to process the effects of it, but I haven't looked into like
You
how
meditate
have I been
too?
traumatized. You know, I meditate, you know, but I don't know. I can't like you, Vanessa can tell me like there's this experience that I had and I was 6 years old and it's coming back to me slowly throughout my whole life and it's all she has this like I'm not even there, you know, like you can pinpoint like certain like ACEs moments that you've had. And I must have been traumatized, but I don't really, you know what I mean? I'm not like, I don't know that the history of my trauma.
I think it would be really interesting to really try and dig into like my family trauma, you know,
Right.
because I really feel the effects of like everything that goes on with like my father or my mom, you know,
Right.
in terms of just how they deal with things or their kind of like dispositions towards things. It all trickles down to me, you know.
Always, it's inevitable. That's how we get conditioned, you know. Like however we were raised, however we were, like the way that our parents viewed certain things, or like you said, like it related to certain things. We're most likely gonna do the same thing, or do the extreme opposite because we didn't like it. You know what I mean? And either way, I feel like when we do that and we're not aware of like how those things affect, like how our parents' stuff affected us, happen.
Oh. Oh. Uh-huh. I didn't even, I thought I intentionally did not unplug that too. That's a funny thing.
Sorry, dude.
It's all good.
I was trying to plug in lights and I unplugged the internet.
Oh, well, now you got your light.
Right. Remember what you said?
No,
Ah,
I do.
it's okay.
you
What is
remember?
it?
What was it?
You were saying how your parents' shit affects you.
Yeah, it all like comes back to me, I think, and it's interesting to see how they cope with things. But I also would like to know kind of their history of what's gone on in their life, you know.
Yeah, in psychology, like we call that we make genograms. And it's kind of like you make like the tree, you know, you can make a genogram tracing anything. You can like, let's say you want to like trace the alcoholism in your family and you trace like generations, like where did it start? Who was alcoholic? You know what I mean? And you start seeing it and you're like, okay. And it just gives you a better picture of like the patterns that are going on in your family. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you're susceptible to all those things, you know. Like alcoholism runs in my family, and I know for sure, like it's like a driving force behind my kind of obsessive habits, you know. So I kind of have to watch that.
Yeah, it's a big thing in my family too, and you can trace anything. It can be like alcoholism, divorces, whatever, abuse, incest, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, uh, people cheating on adultery. Is that the proper term for people cheating on each other? So you know, just different things, and you can start seeing, and you understand it helps you understand yourself better because a lot of times people they don't know how like that book that you said it didn't start with me. You know what I mean? So it gives you a better understanding of why you do things. You know, and you're not blaming yourself or you're just not like clueless as to like why am I like this. You know what I mean? And it's more of like okay, I am a small part of this bigger thing. You know that. Doing the same patterns and then what am I going to do to kind of break that cycle, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the first step. That's what therapy helped me with too, is learning about that and understanding that it's not all like my fault, you know. It's not all because I'm unprepared or whatever.
Yeah, and that's what it's for, so that you can, because like if we're not aware of these things, if we're not aware of the patterns that we are a part of, you know what I mean, a product of, I guess, we end up just living our life as like almost as a reaction of these things. You know what I mean? So we're kind of living our life, and that when we live our life that way, I don't think that we're really living like freely. You know, we're kind of like tied to these like chains of like this is just the way that all these generations have been doing it before me. This is what they gave me. You know what I mean? Yeah. So let's say you have like a very like uptight, overbearing dad, right? Like. Super uptight, overbearing, like controlling, like extra, like high strung, rigid, like controlling, everything has to be like perfect, right? So that might be very overbearing for someone. So usually usually the two things that will happen is either you become just like that because that's how you were conditioned and you know your role model, the person that you look up to is that person, or you become the total opposite, and you become like way more like you want to, it's like being those qualities like have become like almost like a villain for you, you know, and you don't want to be anything like that, so you become like the extreme of that, and you more like chill, more relaxed, you know what I mean? Like you don't want to like embrace types of like control or like, you know, just being, I don't want to say responsible, but like just certain things, you know, like just having like this extreme reaction to it. And either of those things, there aren't really something that you're really choosing. It's just reactions towards what was like imposed on you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So when we're not aware of like you said, like our parents' history and like how that has impacted us, we end up just living our life as reactions to those things. You know what I mean?
Yep. And then I feel like you get comfortable reacting like that. So when you're put in a difficult situation, you're going to do it out of habit, no? Like reacting.
Yeah, it's
like
just
muscle
second
memory,
nature.
right?
Yeah, it's like second nature. It's like, well, yeah, because with enough years of the same thing, our brain like
makes grooves.
Yeah, it's like these schemas that we create in our mind, and that's the only, and like we're so accustomed and familiar to that there is no other way to think.
Yeah, I can like directly relate to that, you know. I feel like only recently I've been able to kind of slow down my reactions to things, you know, especially like emotional reactions to things.
Yeah, it's the hardest to do that, because it's second nature. It's like that's what you do, you know. That's what you've been doing your whole life. So,
but it can be done, and the more knowledge you do have about your family, the easier it's going to be, I think.
I'm a religious zealot, man. I can't believe how much of all this stuff it was in the Bible and the Hindu tech. No, but when I think about like reincarnation, man, it trips me out because I mean, to me, these are all just stories. Like I like the Bible and all these things as stories that might have symbols for whatever for some people. They might make some people go on the crusades, you know, you give and take. But reincarnation, man, you know, the fact that like the things that happen in the past lives, it's almost like your family. It's almost like a weird pointing towards like inherited trauma, you know. It's like, oh, like if you know. You do a bunch of bad shit, it's like, it's going to go on, you know? And it's like, I'm not trying to get churchy about it, really. But it's like, if I don't solve my shit, my shit's going to vibrate out and traumatize other people on different levels, right?
Oh, yeah. I totally agree with that, too, you know? You have to be responsible with all of those things, you know? How you deal with stuff so that you aren't putting bad energy out there. Especially if you have a kid.
Yeah, if you have a kid, yeah.
That's what makes it hard not to just have fun all the time and be like unreasonable, you know?
You can't do it. Can't do it. We've all tried, I'm sure. I have.
I was trying earlier. But then I think about, too, these, you know... Oh, did anyone watch the debate or any of it?
I watched a little bit of yesterday's.
I watched most of that one. Remember, people are tripping on Marianne Williamson, you know? Because she's kind of like... She just sounded like your crazy like hippie aunt who like used to smoke cigarettes, and you know she has like smoker's voice a little bit, and yeah, I don't know. She people thought that she was like this trippy old like witch lady, you know, and we're making fun of her. But I kind of like what she was saying, man. In some respects, like the vibe of it. She's never done anything in politics. Like she's an author, right? But I knew I connected to her through my university Maharishi people. Some of them know her and like.
I don't
her.
like what you said about Bernie.
I don't remember that, but she was saying like trauma. She was like basically talking about like trauma and like the you know the system being this behemoth of evil, and she said it in these ways that are laughable, you know. But when you think about it, I'm like, wait, where's the lie there? Like, you know, where is the lie?
Really false.
Yeah, but obviously, like there were other people that came off more reasonably, but she just seemed to bring up trauma, and then everyone talked about that's the other thing. These fucking kids, man. All the trauma stuff that we've talked about tonight. I'm imagining just being fucking locked in a cage right now, being taken care of by like another kid who's just a prisoner too, been separated from my parents or whatever, you know.
Yeah, like these kids, they're gonna, like you already know, like their brain is not gonna develop the right way because they're these young ass kids who are like scared their whole life. They're just scared constantly right now. Like they don't know where their parents are. They don't know, like they're in a cage. They're these strangers who are most likely not treating them in a nice way, you know what I mean, in a nurturing way. So they're on fight or flight right now, constantly. They don't know what the fuck's gonna happen to them. You know what
And
I
in
mean?
the future, it just seems sad to think about like how much work they're going to have to do, you know, to
Right.
become just functional again. That's what's sad about, and what's bad about trauma for little kids is that like it's going to be a long road, you know, I think.
Yeah, and to even like, if they even do get the work done, you know what I mean? Because it's like you don't know unless you don't know to do that unless someone tells you, you know what I mean? Unless you have the resources, the information, the awareness, and most of these marginalized communities don't have access to this information easily, you know.
Yeah, and I've experienced mostly just middle class trauma, you know, and it's still hard for me to get the information like later on in life by myself.
Yeah, like for like the mental health resources that my family utilized, you know, when we needed it, like I was like, fuck, we needed this shit like years ago. You know, we had no idea. We didn't even have the language to talk about it. We didn't even have the comfort. Like it was just so stigmatized. Like we were just on eggshells, just being scared to even talk anything. You know what I mean? To even just voice it. So it's something that's not as easy for these communities who are underrepresented. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think what we can do for each other too is just kind of be open, you know, like as friends or whatever about things so that we can talk about stuff. Like I remember when you came over here a couple times, Drew, and we just, you know, just talking about anything that came to mind, you know, past experiences, things with your parents, this and that. I feel that if we embrace all of that, it'll be better for our little community, you know.
Yeah, to help normalize like healing and therapy and just like
Yeah, and also having the mindset that like whatever somebody tells me, like you could tell me anything, like the craziest thing, you know,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't judge you, so that we could like try and work through it, you know.
Right. Trying to be there, like sort of honestly and openly, I suppose, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
empathy.
And empathy. Well, I appreciate both you guys for that, man. I'm here for you guys there too. Probably most of the 15 people that are following too. Because I think it's me 3 times and like Kevin, you know?
You
Yeah.
3
Yeah.
times.
And like Bill, yeah. Like,
You have 3 accounts? You have
no,
3 YouTube
I'm just
accounts?
kidding. I didn't go that far.
You probably did.
Yeah.
Am I following you? I don't know anything about.
I went on and made you follow me.
Okay.
I'm
I'm bad at like online. I'm like an old lady when it comes to online computer shit. So,
No, me too.
but that's good. I'm following you.
Yeah. Thank you. That's good, man. I thought I had something that was gonna pop in, but I didn't have a thing. What do you guys? Do you guys want? Do you guys have some things you want to say? Some comments you want to comment? Some things you want to share about your own lives, perhaps,
About trauma.
or anything.
I think well, we're talking about yoga and coping methods, talking about meditation, talking about yoga, whatever. When we're talking about these communities who are in constant chaos and trauma and instability, like the kids that we work with, you know, who are just like fight or flight forever, you know, these type of coping skills, like meditation, yoga, whatever, they I feel like they have to be modified. They have to be modified for them so that they can actually be accessible, because it's not as easy for that type of brain, that type of like nervous system to be able to quiet your mind and just to fucking sit down.
Yeah.
You know, like their attention, they you know what I mean. They have more hyperactivity. You know what I mean, and so I feel like a lot of people forget about that or miss that. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you can give them these resources and tools that seem beautiful and like flowery and like, yeah, I was gonna say the world, but it's like, it's about like knowing how to meet them where they are, like, you know what I'm saying? Because it's not that easy. It was not that easy for a kid with that type of like chemistry in their brain to just sit down in general.
Yeah, like just do the meditation, you know, like just sit there.
It's hard enough for me to do it, you know.
Right.
Just sitting down in one place like for like 5 minutes can be really hard for someone, you know what I mean? So like, I feel like it needs to be modified and tailored.
Do you have any ideas?
And they need extra support, you know what I mean? It's like they need extra, you know what I mean? Like they need someone like one-on-one, like keeping tabs on them. How did that feel? You know what I mean? Like just supporting them, coaching them through it, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I was just thinking about that when you were talking about like yoga for these kids or like meditation.
Yeah, and you're in there asking like, what does the any solutions? And it seems like that's what I remember. The teachers were on strike in LA. I mean, they're not directly saying like, get us yoga teachers, but they were like, there's a lot of kids in our classrooms, and first of all, we want a little more money. We also want lower numbers in our classrooms, but what we really need too are like all these different social services, like social workers, psychologists. Hell, dude, fuck, art teachers, yoga teachers, all these people that can help kids that might be traumatized or experiencing difficulties process all that stuff so they could even be in a position to like go intake, some information from a teacher. You know what I mean? It's like these teachers are basically saying like, we are equipped to teach children, but these children are like,
no,
Or traumatized.
that makes sense. That they don't have any their input is not like open.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't easily teach them.
right.
They can't learn if their social emotional health is not good. If they're socially emotionally, if they're not stable, then no learning is really going to happen. And that's why these teachers, when they were striking, are so important, because it's like they need therapy, they need social workers, they need support groups, but also like these homes of these kids need to be transformed as well. Like the parents need support as well. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't matter if a kid gets meditation and therapy at school, when they come home to the environment, what is that going to look like? So it's
Complicated.
it's more work. It's more like you have to look at the whole system. It's like a systems based type thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
I did hear something that I was going to bring up though too, and fuck the system. You're saying these are this is their systematic things. These are some of the reasons why like I'm down and are interested in like these other countries or other models of self-care medicine, or aiding these communities in some way that I guess would be seen as socialistic or welfare sort of, because I understand that like some of these people, like just to even learn or to live a normal life, like might need a bunch of extra support. And then if that support was even there for me, like if I had like, just more access to some of those things, I think my life would have been better.
And
even just
Huh?
I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Go ahead.
but even just like culturally, if therapy was more normalized, so it didn't feel like something weird to do, that would be a first step, right?
Yeah.
To getting people to kind of start thinking about themselves and what they could do, and just knowing that like you're not fully developed, it's a lifelong kind of thing. And so if you can like take it slow from when you're a kid, I think if kids understood that, it might be less alarming, when something crazy happens.
Right.
yeah, the stigma has a big plays a big role.
I think that's the word that we use every single podcast is stigma.
Yeah, it's a big barrier.
Every single show
it's
so
a big
far.
barrier for people to get the help they need. And
It was hard for me to go to therapy. My family always stigmatized it, going to like a shrink or whatever. So it was
Do you come from a Latino background?
yeah, it's Mexican and then half Irish.
Yeah, so that in the Latino culture, it's a big like there's a big stigma, especially for male. Yeah, especially for the males, like the machismo. It's like nah, like you gotta be strong. You gotta like there's no like to get therapy is like a big weakness. Like it's like a flaw. You know what I mean? And it's just
That's how I always viewed it my whole life, until recently when it was just like, oh no, you have to go.
yeah, or it's for crazy people. When Latino, like when like the more traditional Latinos, like in my family, will hear the word mental or therapy, it's like, oh, you're crazy. No, like not me. I'm not crazy. You know what I mean?
Like if
They're just not open to it.
Right.
Yeah. And that's just because that's the way society has like like conditioned the way that we think about it. If you think about it, like look at the haunted houses, and like at Universal Studios or at what tell me the theme parks.
Like not Scary Farm, whatever.
The scary theme park things, like there's always asylum, like there's always like asylum like mazes or haunted houses, so it's like,
and there's like kids with ADD in there and poor people and
and the media, like that's the way the media like
socialists
portrays like mental health, mental health challenges. I mean, even look at the movies, it's like portrays them as like scary villains or like violent people, and it's not the case, so I can understand why people don't want to be associated with therapy or mental health services, you know what I mean? Because it's like, oh, am I going to be looked at that way, you know what I mean?
Everyone needs it though, like every single fucking person probably needs it.
That's why we should have at the embassies not only the pride flag, we should have like it's okay to go to therapy flag, Like everybody is normal, even though you're abnormal flag. Put all the flags there for everyone to fly. Brian Lane.
Andrew?
He's missing. Nobody knows where he is. No one has heard from him.
What do you mean? He's probably at home.
Brian Lane. Since
He's probably just at home, right?
Yeah, he's probably just at home. He's probably just ignoring the crazy man.
Andrew's being.
But
I think he got.
But you know what I'm gonna say though? One more thing, and it's not trying to rip on anyone. It's ripping on me. I learned another term today called trauma porn, and it was like by this person that was talking about the Stonewall LGBT. And next week, what we're gonna do is gonna be an episode sort of about that. We're a week late, but I'm gonna talk to a friend of mine who is a gay director, and you guys are welcome to join. But trauma porn is when you're using these people, like using the kids or using a transgender community or using anyone, like you're grifting them. You're using them for attention because they're a good advertisement. So she was talking about like companies. She called it like LGBT Inc., where it was like these companies that are like rainbow and they're all about like, oh, we're accepting gay folk, but it was just like to sort of sell shit, and they're like, hey, we're doing this in the name of the transgender people, and they would use people's stories, and then like none of the money would go.
It reminds
to
me of
helping
what
them.
Trump did in was it in the inaugural, which like his first speech?
What did he say?
Or I think the second speech too.
What is that?
Is it the State of it? What is
State
it?
of the Union?
Yeah, where he had like a black guy from the military.
Oh,
then
yeah.
he had his Latino people.
That was
He
trauma
had-
porn. He kept
what I
everyone
mean?
stood up. He's like, and now I have my cripple who all his legs have been cut off,
Yeah.
who supports me. There's a woman.
He's
No
just-
transgender people though, because
He was just like
Yeah.
he was just like using like these people's like traumatic experiences.
It was
like,
crazy.
as,
And
like,
they-
for like cred.
Yeah.
To make sure he gets like this credit.
And some of them straight stood up, like looking around, like, is this right? Like, am I? I swear, dude.
But they were
You
just.
can feel it. I bet they felt it. I bet they felt like being fucking used. Yeah.
A lot of that's happening right now in social media, which I don't know how to feel about it. I don't know if it will be called trauma porn, where people are just posting like these really like provocative, like shocking, like the dad and the daughter who just died right now on the border.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah,
it's
they're
like
in the water.
yeah, and it's almost
horrible.
like I understand
Picture.
some people have really good intentions and some people are just like this needs to be seen. And some people are just like, I need to make sure that everyone knows I'm on the right side and I'm on the left side.
If I don't put up that picture of a dead baby and her dad, like no one's gonna think I'm cool. It's basically, you know what I mean?
No,
like
but-
that's the
The thing
sentiment.
is, like, these people aren't thinking about how it is very triggering for some people who are very close to the, you know what I mean? Like, I just had a friend who just was like, you know what? Like, people, when you post these things, like, be mindful. Like, what is your purpose? What is your intent? Because people, like, who are dreamers, people who are directly related to these issues, like, it's not as easy for them to see this shit. Like, it's really easy for someone who doesn't have that problem, who's a citizen, to be posting these things. You know what I mean? But it's very
And
triggering.
they think that like those people aren't going to see it either, but they are, and they will. They'll come across it,
Yeah.
and it'll be triggering for them, and it'll fuck them up. It's
Exactly.
bad.
It's like know what I think people have to be more intentional, more mindful when they're
Mindful
posting.
posting.
These things, you know what I mean? Because it's
I'm gonna do a class, mindful posting,
And
social.
you should do like a YouTube like instructional video.
Breathe before you.
no,
Yeah.
but so I feel like sometimes maybe sometimes that can be like, I don't know that term, right? That was my first time I heard it. You know, like
Trauma porn. Yeah.
where it's like, oh, let me post the most shocking thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
So people can see how down I am for this cause or whatever.
But they're like hurting the people they're trying to support.
Yeah, it's like, wait, think about the people who are directly impacted by this stuff, and do they need to really be seeing that? You know what I mean? Like, you can still post about you caring about this shit without being so careless.
about it.
Yeah, graphic or so careless about it. You know what I mean?
It's a personal intent thing too. It's like, why am I posting this? I feel like I can't tell anyone what to and not post, but I know what you're talking about is real. And I know there's folks out there who are like posting. You know, it's cool to be politically active or whatever. So there might be some of that. You know, it's like the trend.
The reason why
Which
I'm
could
even
have that.
saying this is because I've had a couple of friends who have actually like messaged me, talked to me about it, and saying like, this is like, you know, it's really hard. It's really hard to see this shit, and I feel like some people like it's kind of like offensive in a way too, you know.
Can you out any of your friends right now who post some of that stuff?
No,
Right.
I'm not gonna out. I'm not gonna out the people who are posting it, and I'm not gonna out the people who told me that it's bugging them. You know what I mean? Because that's
The people who do it are more interesting. The people who it's bugging them out, that's cool too.
I have a couple of friends who are just like, that shit is not cool. Like my family is like, we fear that every single day to be deported or whatever. You know.
Have they tried talking to the posters about it though?
No, I it's not that easy. I feel I'm not in that position, but I understand like it's not that easy when that's part of your identity of not having citizenship. Like look at the stigma right now, you know, they're criminals, they're rapists or whatever, you know what I mean? Like
I was imagining hearing those debates last night because we know some folks, right, who are DACA people. Oh, I'm sorry. And it just sounded
so it's like it's not as easy for these people to be
to
address it, you know what I mean, to address it because they don't feel like they're empowered to be like, hey, don't be doing that, you know what I mean? Like they have to be in the margins and they have to be like low key about their shit.
But if they did, don't you think that would empower them too? I know it's not easy, you know. I have no idea what it's like, but
I definitely think that they have a right, and it will help other people like understand. And I feel and some have posted shit and say like, hey, can you be careful and like be mindful about what and why you post shit. Like people have done. One of these people have done that. You know what I mean? And that's good because it kind of brings awareness to other people. You know what I mean? But I understand when people don't feel like they can or don't feel like they want to. You know what I mean? Like they are getting triggered, you know, their trauma is getting triggered, so I understand like whatever way they choose to cope with that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think by addressing it though, it might help them like build boundaries, right? And that's like a big thing with surviving trauma and dealing with it is knowing like what you're going to accept or allow like in your life, you know.
No, I definitely think it's a good idea and it helps other people understand, you know. I just feel like it's not as easy for them.
It's not easy, yeah, for sure.
Well,
yeah, transitional aged youth. It's mental health.
My mom works for mental health, the county mental health department, and she works with a transitional aged youth, and she gave us all this swag. She gets she gets like all this like, you know, what do you call that?
Swag.
K-swag.
She gave us shirts and like hats after work today. I'm like, okay.
I feel like it was kind of fitting, you know?
It is fitting, and it fits your head very well.
All right, let's end on our wit, man. I'll bring down the curtain.
All right, man.
You guys want to plug anything in or unplug the internet? Because here comes the curtain.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys.
Bye,
Thank you, Chris.
oh yeah. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. You can't put that part.
What part?
Right now of us struggling.
Oh, I know. I have to edit all.
I hate the rapists, so let's go rapist some rapists. I hate violence, now let's go murder violence. I hate molesters, let's molest them molesters. Let's ignore all our problems, let's ignore all our problems.